Making a dandelion ornament like this isn't really as hard as it might look. Stick with me and I will show you how you do it. So the first thing we do is to mix up some resin. So we start with the epoxy resin and then we go over to mixing in the hardener. And in this project it's really important to use slow hardener because the layers we are gonna pour are too thick for normal hardener. Most of the time when using slow hardener, making bubbles when mixing the hardener and epoxy resin together isn't really that big of a deal. But in this case, because we are gonna put a dandelion up in the resin, it's quite important to not mix bubble into the resin. If you do this, the bubbles will get stuck in the dandelion seeds and you will clearly see it. Normally I mix resin for around 2 minutes, but since I'm mixing it a lot slower now than I normally do because of the bubbles, I mix it for around 3 or 4 minutes. So then we are ready for our first pouring. And you can see that I've taped the dandelion onto a rig, and the reason for that is so that the dandelion won't move around when I pour in the resin. So when we're done with the first layer on dandelion number 1, we're moving on to number 2. After 24 hours my resin has reached the jelly state, and I start by removing the rigs in preparation for the second pour of my dandelion. The dandelion now stands on itself in the resin, so there's no more need for the rig. So here I am making a mistake. This was the first time I was using this new molds. It turned out, as you will see later, that the mold did not stick well enough to the glue, so there was kind of a mess. So right about here I start to see trouble. I begin seeing resin seeping out of the cracks in the mold. And at this point it's no point of return, so I just have to do what I can to secure the mold as good as I can and kind of hope for the best. As I was pouring into the other mold, I saw that the resin still seeped out of the first one. So I found out that I had to do something. I had to mix up some extra resin and try to compensate for everything that was leaking out of the molds. I apologize about the camera angles in these clips, but a lot of things were going on and I kind of had some other things on my mind at this point. From the amount of resin I pour into the mold here, you can kind of see how much actually spilled out because of the bad gluing. And here is from the day after, when it's all dried up and you can see how much of a mess it really was. So, even though the second layer ended up in complete chaos and a total mess, we end up with a result that is pretty good, actually. Finally, it's time for the last step before the ornament is ready, and that is sanding. We are going through the grits from 120 to 180 to 240, 320, all the way up to 1200. And after that we are going to use the micro mesh system, which goes all the way up to 12,000 grit. Yeah, that happened. Fortunately, my phone was in the way to take up most of the water, but don't worry, it survived. When we finally reach 12,000 grit with the micro mesh, we can really see how much the patience pays off, as the dandelion really starts to shine. So, then we are done. I'm quite pleased with the result. I haven't yet sanded the other dandelion that I made. I'm probably gonna do it later, but the sanding takes hours, so I haven't had the time to do it yet. But this one at least I ended up with being very happy with, and I hope you enjoyed as well. Thank you for watching, and I hope I see you in my next video.